Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Detections. I'm continuing on with my whole trend of trying to use different voices and intros and how I introduce myself. I am one of your hosts, Understudy77, and I am joined by my friend,
Exiled Trades. There, I tried something. I tried something different myself. I don't know how it worked out.
That was really slow.
I was trying to channel the Stevie from Malcolm
Sloth?
in the Middle. No, from Malcolm in the Middle.
The movie with the cop bunny? Zootopia? I watched that movie the other day.
I haven't seen it, but I did see that scene in the previews.
Yeah. It's actually it's a really, really freaking good movie. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's genuinely a really good movie. And the sloth in particular is just genuinely pretty funny. Like, it's like any other joke that kind of involves running things slowly.
Yeah.
They all go on a little bit longer than they should. I was camping last weekend and, I came to the conclusion that, we were watching some old episodes of Family Guy while we were up there. And, like, Family Guy as a show is the master of letting a joke run just a little bit too long. Like, that's kind of their thing, right? The, like,
Yeah.
for like 2 minutes. Like, that show is particularly good at letting a joke run a little bit too long. And when your jokes are based on going kind of slow, it's really easy to let them run over time a little bit too quickly. So, we'll only do that for like the next 45 minutes and then everything's okay. But we got a big night of news and events and coming back into the SOC-in-a-Box topic because somebody on Twitter asked us to do it. And, like, we're really that easy. Like, Hey, talk about this. And we're like, okay, cool.
Okay, will do. But on a side note, I was watching a YouTube video from this YouTuber named Patrick Willems. He's just been doing, like, from home, kind of like late night TV show stuff about movies and films. Apparently he's done a whole bunch of stuff on Marvel and like DC comic movies. But he did one about Christopher Nolan and IMAX. And I only bring it up because he spends about 5 minutes, like we do on this podcast with our guests, and talk about Animal Crossing.
See, the problem is it's getting harder and harder to talk about Animal Crossing because I haven't actually turned the game on in like 2 months.
And that's what he said. He's like, since doing the show, I haven't been on in like a month. But still mentioned like he can't play Animal Crossing, which I found entertaining myself.
Yeah, kind of like how you can't watch Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, I keep finding other things, although I'm running out of other things to watch now.
Good, then start watching Doctor Who, damn it. I actually just this week, I go camping, I relax and everything, and then, this week starts, and finally the thing that I've been waiting for months and months happens, and that's that my new 8-bay Drobo ships. I've had, 46 terabytes worth of drives sitting ready to go in this thing and waiting for it to ship, and it's been back ordered for like 3 months. So it shows up Tuesday. So, my whole server setup is all down for a while. My server rack is pulled out from the wall and in pieces. Like, my office is just a freaking wreck while I'm transferring 15 terabytes over into this new system. And then, like, I ran into stupid little problems, right? So, like, I have a 6 terabyte drive that when I plug it in, it recognizes, it initializes, everything works fine. But when I restart the Drobo, it freezes on boot. When I pull the drive out, it works fine. So, like, I refuse to pull the drives out of my old one to add to the new one because I'm worried that, like, I'm going to have some kind of a stupid problem. So, like, I'm just not going to do it. Not yet. Like, I need to get some more drives. I need to test some other stuff. Like, I got to make sure everything's stable before I do shit with that thing right now.
Yeah, makes sense because if it does screw up, you might end up losing all the data on the old drives.
Exactly. And I don't want to lose data. Like, I'm a digital pack rat. Like, I can't lose data. That's why I have, 4 10 terabyte drives in the new one with room to put 4 more drives in it.
Going from a digital pack rat to more of a digital pack mule.
I mean, I'm okay with that. But remember, like, I'm also using dual disk redundancy and things like that. So, I mean, ultimately, even with 4 10 terabyte drives, my effective space is only about 17 terabytes. Like, I'm not using near that. Like, I'm using every security feature that I can. So 2 of those drives can die and I'll still have access and I'll still have everything. I'm being very careful. That's why I bought the 8 bay so that I can get that functionality and eventually load it with 4 more 10 terabyte hard drives. Anyway, again, we do have like a very jam-packed episode that's worth to chat through. I think probably the first thing on anybody's mind is going to be the Twitter hack. And when I say hack, like, I'm air quoting hack because there's just not enough information known about it yet, like, in that regard, right? So essentially, sometime yesterday for us, about 4 days ago for all of you, timey-wimey, very prolific Twitter accounts were starting to tweet, hey, I'm doubling Bitcoin, send me money. Apparently in like 2 hours, these guys made like $100,000, by the way.
Yeah, it was like 13 Bitcoins total was what I saw by the time they shut down the wallets.
So, this is all going on. A lot of stuff is happening. How is it? It was Obama. It was Joe Biden. It was a bunch of people. So, like, how is that happening? So, there's a lot of speculation that exists still. There's a lot that's unsure still. But ultimately, they either social engineered or used an insider to gain access to a Twitter internal admin tool.
Yeah, the official thing from Twitter support is that they believe it's a coordinated social engineering attack to target employees that had access to the internal systems and tools.
Yeah,
like
but
their admin panel.
Ultimately, they probably wouldn't say yet if it was an insider threat, and they might not know yet if it was an insider threat kind of situation.
Yeah.
Right? Because Vice, right or not, is saying that, like, they're actually talked to some of the hackers and it was an insider situation. So again, lot of unsure kind of things going around, right? There's a lot of unknown information as it stands today regarding this. Basically, though, what happened is somebody essentially had the keys to the kingdom on attacker stuff. Somebody who runs the Twitter account for @6 did a write-up on Medium. It's actually referenced in a Brian Krebs article. And what he's suggesting is that the admin tool doesn't necessarily give you access to the content. What it does do is let you change email addresses and turn off two-factor authentication, likely because that admin tool is to help people who are locked out of their accounts, right? Well, who does customer support and helps people who are locked out of their accounts? Usually pretty low-level tech support folks for the most part. So from a coordinated perspective, I saw a lot of outrage, like, oh my God, like, how can this be? Like, how could Twitter even have this access? Well, they kind of need it. Like, you got to have it. And the people who have access to it aren't going to be your best people. They're going to be the people who can help reset somebody's account.
And ultimately, Twitter's still a private company running a private app that they have. I mean, it's their application. They need admin access to control their application to handle
user trust, and there's legal stuff that exists around that and all kinds of stuff like that. And that's likely why this application doesn't necessarily provide you content and things of that nature. But it does allow you to do some administration functions across the app. Essentially, things like, and this is also speculation based on several of the articles that I read, the ability to turn off two-factor authentication to an account and the ability to reset the email that an account directs to. So belief is that, hackers via insider threat or social engineering gain access to this admin panel, turn off two-factor authentication on accounts, on the high-profile accounts that they want to hit, change the email address, and then do a password reset. So it goes to the hacker's new email address, right? Effectively thereby resetting the password, taking over the account. and then using it to spam Bitcoin. So I'm not going to say, because speculation, I'm not going to say that more was definitely done, right? Because maybe it is just that. They just tweeted out some Bitcoin shit. But it kind of feels like the equivalent to that story from a few weeks back where a dude broke into a bank to cook a Hot Pocket. Like, it really does. Like, and we laugh about that, and it was super duper amusing to me, but like, it feels similar to me. Like, that's the president, famous people, unbelievable amount of sensitive data probably existed within the DMs across some of the accounts that they were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It's not known, but something to me says smokescreen. And I'm not sure, so I don't want to speculate too much. And again, it's the ramblings of a madman, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I think it stems from like our gut instincts of, having worked some compromises and incidents and seen some stuff. I did find the back and forth between Dave Kennedy and Malware Tech Blog on Twitter, kind of going back and forth and seeing people jump in about maybe there's something more. Maybe it was just breaking into a bank to cook a Hot Pocket.
I mean, I love both of them, but I stand with Dave Kennedy in this. It just feels like there's more.
It's that detective gut instinct, like there's something else here that we're not seeing yet.
Yeah, or it's our desire to see more, right? It's our desire to say somebody had this and that's what they did. Like, what?
Yeah, we don't want to believe that that's all they did. But...
Right? So, like, there's always that part of it, too. So, like, maybe that is it. Maybe it was a $100,000 Bitcoin scam. It seems like a waste of that level of access to me. In just a huge, huge way.
And I did see a speculation that because, like you said, with the sensitive data on the DMs and the DM information hasn't been talked about, that maybe that stuff was harvested and
exactly. This stuff could have been the smokescreen to get the other stuff, or they knew they were on to them, so they're like, let's do this so that we point everybody in this direction, right? And then it'll freak everybody out and it'll bring everybody up and blah blah blah.
Which is a tactic we see, right? I mean, like we see
all the time.
We see DDoS attacks happen to smokescreen behind, like.
I mean, we see ransomware attacks to smokesceen the theft of data. Yeah. Right? Like, we see all kinds of disruptive behavior to smokescreen data, and there's no more disruptive data than obvious scams coming off high-profile accounts, because that's where the focus is going to be. So, to me, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just a thing. Yeah. Now, there's another piece of it. There are a lot of people in our industry who are, like, really coming down on the Twitter support, like the Twitter admin or security team. Don't do that. Those fuckers are probably working overtime right now. Yeah. Like, they're doing everything that they can. I can tell you that, like, I do security for a giant internet company. It is a hard job. And, like, people fall for social engineering at the end of the day. It happens. Insiders get compromised at the end of the day. Like, however they got in, sophisticated social engineering or insider, like, this stuff happens.
And for those people, this is probably their one major incident that they'll deal with their career.
Well, while they're there anyway, depending on what they did before or what they do next. But, like, I'm sure they're a very talented team. I'm sure that they're a very successful team, and I'm sure they're working their ass off to figure out exactly what happened. But, like, there's this tendency of whenever something bad happens, we jump and we blame the security team. You know, we talk about how difficult it can be occasionally to be on the defensive side of InfoSec. This is why. The second something bad happens, everybody's like, hang them! Hang them!
Yeah. What was it? I think it was the Jason Street talk at Derby when he said CISO is the chief information sacrificial offering.
Oh, God.
Position.
But, I mean, that's where we get like that way with security teams, too. Oh, my God, something happened. We need to hang the whole security team. Clearly, they weren't doing their job good enough. Like, you know, it comes down to this concept of, like, you know, I was thinking about this the other night, and it's a little bit off topic, but it's really interesting. You know, in any good, like, incident response process, or in any good, like, you know, overall, like, detection and response process, right? What you want to do is you want to, okay, what am I not looking for? Okay, I see this thing. Okay, cool. Here's my vector. okay, cool, I've detected it. Okay, cool. Now how do I make it never happen again, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem. More often than not, you can't make it never happen again. Like, especially when the majority of entry point vectors are like malware or phishing or like shit like that.
That's dependent on the user execution, the user choosing to do something.
You can stop a very specific thing. So you can say that user, that malicious person will never send this email, or that piece of malware will never run on my network again, or whatever. But like, you can't stop the technique per se. And in this case, like, the technique is social engineering. Like, you can't stop the technique. It's gonna happen. People are gonna retune it, retool it, try new ways, do all that stuff. You just can't always stop the technique. You can't always proactively defend the technique. And when you're talking about social engineering, unfortunately, you can't always detect the technique. You can get pretty good at it, but ultimately it comes down more to user education. And if your end users aren't susceptible to that education and they don't take it super seriously, which, let's be honest, most of them don't, because they don't see the real scary world that we see, right?
Or people, or the people in the IT security support think that they're immune to it, like they're going to catch every single one because they have the intelligence, that like that pride of, I know what to look for.
But you can't catch every fish. It just doesn't happen. Like, tools that cost millions and millions of dollars can't catch every fish. Because all you really need at the end of the day is a really well-crafted social engineering attempt that starts up a conversation and then gets information. And like, there's nothing inherently malicious in that. It's just an email thread between two people.
Yeah.
So unless you're like looking at every single email, you can't really do a whole lot there. You do your best, and when shit hits the fan, you pull into overdrive, figure out exactly what happened, and figure out if there is a way that you can stop it from happening again.
That's why in this NIST framework and all these other things, there is a response section that gets a lot of attention.
Correct. With that said, though, we should probably jump into the other news.
I do, but I want to say one thing that was like a good thing that I saw from all this.
Okay.
While it was going down, like watching Twitter, watching Discord servers and stuff, that the general InfoSec community came together to start sharing information and try to figure out what we could as an outsider, knowing some people involved in that conversation probably had direct lines to the Twitter support people to get them information if, like the people who were good at OSINT or hopping in could get some extra information to help them out. Like the community coming together to work through it, I saw was a pretty cool thing happening through all this.
See, I thought there was another very cool thing going on. The uprising of the unverifieds.
Yes.
Since they, basically locked out all of the verified or all of the unverified. So.
And a number of people were like, hey, now that it's all unverified people, like there's less drama. I can handle it better. Maybe we should just do this. Like I saw someone propose, like, how about we just lock out all verified accounts for 2 hours every day?
Uprising of the unverified. Anyway.
What do you got for us? Should we do the other heavy one? Just get all the heavy stuff out of the way first, and then.
Oh, you mean want to play who? Or you want to play Who Wants to Find a CVE?
Yes.
Yeah, man, do it.
And apparently, like, I know I'm missing some because I can't remember everything. But what has it been like the past month? It's almost been like CVE, CVSS score 10 bingo, with different. Vendors, manufacturers, not manufacturers, but like developers, companies.
Yeah, so you go through the CVSSs and I'll tell you when I got bingo.
I only remember 3 and I documented 3 and I can tell my memory is missing some, but we've got SAP, we've got F5, and then we had the big Microsoft one.
Bingo! Sorry, I think that was too soon. I think you have to specify.
We needed 2 more to get bingo. But yeah, like it was amazing to see just these. I don't know. Maybe that's the July 2020 is the shitstorm of CVE high CVSS scores coming out, like in rapid succession. And Yeah, I know out of all of those, the Microsoft DNS one definitely had the most conversation happening. I have a feeling that there was a lot of people who were working some overtime this last weekend too to get that taken care of.
Sure. All right. So does that mean we're diving into the news?
Yes.
So I'm going to start with a fun one. And I'm going to start with this fun one specifically because it kind of ties into the social engineering thing and that whole rant and soapbox that I just went on. And I'm going to start with the headline. Don't open that winky-faced email. A highly successful email spam campaign is infecting computers with ransomware and other malware like cryptocurrency miners and botnet software. So, a bunch of bad stuff, right? Normal phishing, things like that. This one actually duped it in a way that I found funny. The subject line was a winky face. That was it. They made the subject line a winky face. And then the attachment was a very enticingly named zip file. Not a lot of other information outside of that, but this thing became successful because the subject line was a winky face. So if you're going to tell me that social engineering and like phishing doesn't work, the subject line was a winky face. And it worked.
Yes. Winky
Just
face.
throwing that out there. So,
I mean,
what do you got?
That kind of reminded me the announcement of Python that now you can import emoticons to write Python scripts and code with emojis.
Oh.
Now we can have malware that is sent over email with a winky face that is written with winky faces.
Nice.
So I'm going to jump off the fun stuff because I got one fun one I want to save for the end. But we'll start with, I saw this article about AWS Lambda abuse, and they kind of give a good breakdown on how it could work to create like a denial of service condition with Lambda as part of this big move to develop in a serverless environment or develop apps or websites that are run completely serverless. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's a very in-depth article. But it's something to read and become familiar with because I got some really good recommendations on how to mitigate the impact and how to configure AWS alerts for dealing with abuse against the Lambda.
Okay.
What do you got? Your turn.
So let's pivot into when attackers' defensive stuff goes wrong. Because this one's actually really fun too. Iranian cyber spies have left their training videos exposed online. So IBM X-Force finds a whole bunch of video recordings used to train Iranian state hackers. There was a server that was exposed that has a trove of screen recordings showing hackers how to hack stuff. So it basically goes through basic account hijacking techniques, how to export data, all sneeze. Okay, I'm back. All kinds of stuff like that. But I find this one particularly interesting. First off, like if this stuff becomes public, like if X-Force actually releases these videos, like imagine the boon that will be for defenders, right? Like this is the Iranian like playbook essentially, almost entirely. So like there could be some value in that. Like, oh hey, like here's this entire country's set of techniques. We can build so many detections.
Yeah, and then that takes us to the top of the pyramid of pain with being able to figure out their actual techniques and not just deal with the low level atomic
without us having to figure it out ourselves. Because, they very helpfully left it available online in video form for us.
Thank you.
I
want to be the first person to thank you to the Iranian training group to help us out in such a selfless way.
Exactly. So like that's mine. Back to you.
I saw something cool. Normally we dog on Google for the stuff that they do, what I still believe rightfully so. But they did do something pretty cool recently that they open sourced their Tsunami vulnerability scanner. So this is something that they've been using internally at Google, and they open source it. So now it's available for other people to use it, and since it's designed for dealing with the Google networks, it could be an interesting thing for other people to check out when they have to deal with large networks themselves, like, I don't know, other internet service providers or media companies.
Oh, I see what you did there. Well played. Well played. So in other open source cool stuff, MITRE ATT&CK has just had a huge update. And I'm kind of I've been a big fan of MITRE ATT&CK for a long time, even though, it's been absolutely beaten to the death everywhere you could ever go. But they've released sub-techniques, and they've been kind of betaing sub-techniques for a while, but like sub-techniques are now officially released, and they're kind of super awesome.
It is pretty awesome. Like I was using MITRE ATT&CK stuff for a work task, and saw when they rolled out these sub-techniques before I saw the notification that they rolled it out. And I do like it a lot better, because an example of what they did was they took something like initial access phishing, which previously was broken up with like spear phishing, attachments, and stuff like that, and then just called it phishing. And then put all of those
attachment, spear phishing link, and
yep.
spear phishing via service.
So it consolidated their techniques down to a much more initial, easier to view, easier to chew,
Correct.
with the really granular stuff as a dive in.
Exactly, which actually kind of makes everything a bit easier to kind of go through and understand, and draws those logical linkings. So like the sub technique stuff is really, really great. And I'm very, very excited about it. So back to you.
All right. So speaking of that, I was reading an interesting article about Python as a growing trend for writing malware. So because, what are they saying here? I guess it's just as more people are learning Python, they're starting to write in it, develop in it for malware. And the article even goes into some of the ways that, because most of the business world is still very much Windows, all the ways that you can compile Python into a Windows executable file. And then at the end, they have a whole section of various malware that has been seen in the wild that was written in Python. Like CDuke from Palo Alto's, like CDuke or PyLocky or Poet Rat as some of the examples that they use. And then they go into malware analysis tools that you can use for these Python malware modules.
Totally can't pretend that I'm surprised that they're making malware out in Python, because like everybody's using Python now. Like it's the new hotness.
It's been around for a while, but yeah, it is the new hotness. And that's why we have this article here. So give people kind of a good shot in the arm for jumping into it as it's starting to become more prevalent.
Yep. So, sorry. If that was loud, I don't know. My headphones just hit my microphone though.
That wasn't too loud, but it was noticeable.
So this shouldn't genuinely surprise anybody, really. But it's just been determined for the first time. Malware researchers like check virus total, and they do all that stuff, and that's always happened. But they've detected a malware that actually looks for anything that hits any.run. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with any.run or not, but it is one of my favorite up-and-coming services for investigation of malware, because it actually like breaks down process trees. Like it's just really, really well thought out, like in how they present their information, and way better than like a standard report. Like everything is click throughable. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. You can look at full process trees. Like any.run is just super, super great in general. That being said, there's a specific executable now that has been seen in a password stealing Trojan spam campaign. That if it's on any run, it basically just pops up a message that said any run detected, and then exits. And the malware will not be executed so that the sandbox cannot analyze it. So I actually expect that will be happening more and more. And I expect that any.run will have to kind of address that challenge to try to not seem like it's any run anymore when you upload stuff. Outside of that, though, I will tell you it's a super, super cool service if you haven't played with it before, for doing malware analysis and just looking into stuff. And I think it's probably easily my favorite one that's out there right now. Other than that, like, it's basically all public. But, you know, the part outside of, like, you know, internally, maybe I don't use it, but externally in my own time, like, I freaking love it.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome.
Go. What do you got?
So I have here that was another informative article to me, as I was not previously familiar with these law enforcement techniques where they use what they call these network investigative techniques. But Vice put out an article about how the Secret Service tried to work with Seattle PD to get extra information about a ransomware operator that had successfully deployed ransomware to a jail in the state of Washington. And the article goes in, explains how they work, and it ends up being like just like a law enforcement malware laden document, like a Word document, Excel file, something like that they send like back and forth, like they get encrypted and try to have the operator decrypt it and try to get him back and forth to, you know, unzip and execute the file that's inside of that. But this article says that in this instance, it was unsuccessful. So it's
okay.
It's interesting that that we're seeing that they're trying to use these same social engineering techniques and malware that criminals are using, and not having any success with it. And the article also brings up a point about where if they're on tour, when they send this network investigative technique file back, and the quote from the article is, "It's like playing Russian roulette with cross-border cyber operations." Because I don't know the legal stuff, but it seems like a sticky legal situation that if you have United States of America based law enforcement that convince like a Russian, Iranian citizen to run malware on their computer, could be some potential legal issues there.
Sure. Also, I think you have to go again because I think I have to end with my non-InfoSec related topic.
All right.
But I promise the next two are awesome and lighthearted.
And I'm going to start off the lighthearted with a InfoSec related one, but the British cops have been using artificial intelligence to spot porn, but whatever they're using keeps on finding pictures of deserts as porn more than actual porn.
Which is just amazing.
Yeah. Like those sweeping curves of this light brown color that could potentially be human flesh.
Sand dunes.
Sand dunes. And it's not porn. So there we go.
That's wonderful. All right.
The future of AI is finding desert instead of porn.
So I have a non-InfoSec related one, but this is one of the best things that I've seen in a long time. So Lego, I'm a big Lego fan, by the way, especially during quarantine. I find that I've been building a lot of Lego sets during quarantine. But Lego has partnered with Nintendo for a lot of Super Mario stuff, culminating in this professional kit for those ages 18 plus. Which is, you know, Lego usually says like 4 to infinity. No, this kit's like actually 18 plus. It's like a 2,600 piece kit that replicates an original Nintendo, Super Mario NES cartridge, controller, and old school TV. Here's the kicker. The old school TV has a little hand crank on the side of it that actually makes Mario move through a level. That's also built out of Legos. It's one of the craziest and coolest sets of Legos I've ever seen. It comes out on August 1st at $230, and I am totally buying it. And we will link it for any of you who are also interested in building a 2,600 piece, by the looks of it, very complicated Lego set that will look amazing no matter where you put it. So
I'm definitely going to be checking this out.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited. I have no idea when I'm ever going to find the time to build it, but like I'm getting it, damn it. Like I've been looking at the really nice pro more Lego kits for a while and been like, well, I really like that, but like I don't love it that much. No, this one I do. Like the NES was my childhood and Super Mario Brothers and just everything about it. It's just perfect. And if this was video, I would share, but it's not. But I don't care. Like, trust me, go look at the link. It's worth seeing.
And just as a reminder, that's how we keep Blue Team sexy, by not being on video.
That's very true. But with that, I think we can go into our topic for the evening. Would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I'm excited because we're getting back to our SOC-in-a-Box series, where we talk about building a SOC from the ground up. In our last episode, we talked about some of the initial important things like scoping, figuring out base policies, group size, business interactions, and we're going to talk about, tools today?
Yeah, tools is probably a good one to talk about today. But there's a couple considerations that you have to consider before you can really talk about tools. First is like, what does your organization look like? So, like, let's be honest. If you're 150, and let's like theoretically say, no matter what, it's like a 150 person organization. Because when we start getting up into like the 10 or 12,000s, like we can talk a little bit about that. But like once you start to get like in the thousands to 10,000s, it gets much more complicated and much more expensive. So one of the things you have to consider is your organization mostly remote or mostly in office? That becomes really important for a couple of reasons, because people aren't, if they're mostly remote, like they're not naturally going to jump on like a VPN provider unless they have to, right? Unless access to something that they have is there. And to be honest, most emails moving to like Outlook Web Access or Gmail or any of those services. So you don't need VPN to get to your email anymore. So most people probably aren't going to use the VPN. So when you talk about like your investment budget in that scenario, and in general, I wouldn't suggest investing in this anyway, but still, like EDR becomes a much bigger bang for your buck. So ultimately, one of the things that you really have to figure out is, where is your bang for the buck? Where are your users? What are they accessing? What are they doing? And that can help kind of guide the determination of what you need from a tool perspective. Because maybe you don't need a crap ton of network monitoring if you don't do a crap ton of things on your network, because most people are at home. But you do want endpoint monitoring for those users, because that's where you're going to see stuff and find stuff and catch stuff and so on and so forth.
Yeah, which makes sense, because like with the trend to having more remote workforce right now due to current situations, then you're going to want to look for those like the email hosting providers, how you can get access to what's happening internally with that system.
Correct. And if you're using something like Outlook Web Access or Gmail or anything, like there are going to be logging that's available. So like, figure out where your endpoints are, what they're connecting to, so you can figure out kind of, do you want to prioritize on your network side or on your endpoint side? But also like, then you got to figure out what things that you need to be looking for. So you really need to say like, okay, like our email is internal, our email is OWA or like Outlook Web or whatever, or Office 365 email. So what logging is provided for that? What does that look like? And then you need somewhere to stick it. And that's where I think everybody's favorite word, the SIM, comes in. And I gave 2 talks last year specifically on SIMs and how they go wrong so often, that are available in like my bio on the detections page if you want to go look at those talks. But like SIMs require constant feeding and updates and all kinds of other things. Like it takes a lot.
It does take a lot, and I think they still have their place in the detection.
Oh, for sure.
But they're not where I still see a lot of people thinking and talking about like they're the end-all, be-all single source of information. Like, yeah, back in the early 2000s, that was the tool. That's what you had. That's what you deployed, right? Because there wasn't really anything else. Before that, you were looking at your individual IDS, IPS sensors, your firewalls individually.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the first time that we had some sort of like centralized place to look at all this information.
And to be honest, it is still your best option for a single, I don't necessarily want to say single pane of glass, but single pane of investigation. It doesn't mean you're not going to have to go do forensics or dig into one of the security tools itself. but oftentimes you can get so much. And one of the other benefits of having something like a SIM is you can utilize features from your security tools that you don't utilize day by day. So like, if you purchase one of the major endpoint tools, a CrowdStrike or a Carbon Black or something, like they have built-in detections, right? And you can kind of do some custom stuff, but you can basically API everything that happens on endpoints into something like a SIM, and then you can very easily build a whole bunch of detections looking for different things because you're putting all that information in one place. You can correlate it, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. So like, plus you can investigate it there. You can potentially hold it longer there than some of these cloud providers will hold data, so on and so forth. So while they are complicated, while they require a lot of care and feeding, I still do consider them a relatively critical part of a security organization and monitoring organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that they've come in like two major flavors now. You have your more traditional ones like QRadar that are these correlation engines. Like they take single static log entries or forwarded alerts from those tools, compile them together, set off a separate alert based on that correlation. And then you have like these log correlators used as a SIM, like an elk stack or
say log search engine.
Log search engine,
correlators.
Yeah. Yeah, these log search engines that they then use as a SIM, and they build these correlation rules. A lot of the main differences with there is the focus, right?
Yeah, where something like a QRadar is going to be a little bit more traditional. It's not necessarily going to be as easy to go search raw log files as it is to build the alerting and stuff like that, right? Where something like an elk stack or a Splunk is more a log search engine first and kind of a crappy-ish SIM bolted onto it.
Yeah, pretty much.
But that log search engine has so much value that it makes it worth it.
And the analytics, like the actual statistical analytics and the math you can do on logs with those
exactly
search engines. But then, like you said, it's kind of like this crappy correlation engine bolted onto it, where the traditional ones like ArcSight, like QRadar, they have what they're really good at is taking all of that stuff and responding really quickly. So if it's that known that you're working from, you can get pretty close to like pseudo real time. Detection and response.
But you also have a third type that's starting to pop up more and more often now, and that's the concept of SOAR, or the concept of security orchestration automation in response. Things like Phantom and Demisto, which is now known as Cortex XSOAR, which honestly is a way worse name. And there's new like SOAR platforms popping up every day, and most of them are Python backended. We're talking about Python earlier, that allow you to not only do, pull in events and do security investigations and some minimal case management, but they also allow you to do automation, like running Python scripts in the backend and integrations with other tools, and basically saying, if I see this hash, run it through VirusTotal. If VirusTotal says this hash is bad, automatically block this hash, or automatically go lock out the system, or malicious emails, automatically go pull that malicious email from an inbox so the user can't access it, so on and so forth. So like you're basically taking away some of the menial tasks that an analyst would do, giving them more time to analyze when you go down that path.
Now, it's interesting that you say that you put that as like a third flavor, because I would put that almost as like a separate tool in the maturity of a SOC. And here's why, is often those initial inputs into a SOAR platform come from not just like your endpoint tools like an antivirus or Carbon Black, Tanium, but it also comes from the SIMs that we were just talking about, like QRadar, like ArcSight, like Splunk, Graylog, and elk stacks.
You're not entirely wrong, but that is starting to change a little bit, which is why I call it the third flavor, because some people are starting, and some of these companies are, instead of just being sheer automation engines, are basically starting to build that log search engine case management stuff right in there too. So it becomes that single pane of glass for some of your research and stuff as well. It's not as far along as I would like it to be today, but it is starting to happen more and more often, and companies are starting to really pivot and integrate more and more on the SOAR side, which is realistically at some point probably going to replace SIM altogether.
Which I can see that happening, and it's mainly because that is able to do the one thing that analysts always scream about, which is additional data context.
Correct.
That
It's going to pull other stuff for you from external sources, and it's going to pull other stuff from you for internal sources, as well as, you know, the other thing that they scream about is like opening tickets and crap like that, and it can basically remove a lot of that pain.
Yep. So your first visual of seeing this alert coming in not only has what fired in the SIM, what's coming from your various tools, and there's a ticket already open, but all the additional menial tasks, like you were saying, virus totals already ran. It's probably done some like custom SharePoint search. You have something like any additional like note context. I'm totally blanking. We had them on. I feel bad.
Polarity?
Yeah, Polarity. Like you got the Polarity stuff already integrated in there.
So that's the other thing. We talked a bit about, you know, so when you talk about tools that you need, so you've got to figure out what you really want to monitor, right? So like if you're going down the network route, you're probably looking at some form of traditional IDS. You may look into full packet capture, something like NetWitness, or better than that, Moloch, because Moloch's awesome.
And
no affiliation.
And real quick on the IDS IPS stuff, like we even have a couple different flavors there. We have the traditional signature based like Suricata Snort, and then the event based one like Zeek Bro.
Sure. I don't even know that I would call like Zeek Bro like I don't know that I would put them in the IDS category in a weird way. Like I'd almost place them outside of that category a little bit.
But that's how it gets pitched. It's kind of like how you were just talking about with SOAR as a different flavor of SIM.
By the way, Zeek and Bro are the same thing.
Yeah. There was a slash. It was Zeek/Bro. I know it still gets used because a lot of people still think about Bro, even though the official name is Zeek.
Sure. That's just for everybody else's benefit. Like it's the same thing. So like you kind of pick some detection strategy for your network side and you look at that. And ideally, if you can get full packet capture, you go for full packet capture because that's helpful. If you can get TLS decryption, you go for TLS decryption because basically everything's TLS now. So if you don't have it, like full packet capture becomes a lot less useful. Everything becomes a lot less useful. We talk about EDR. And like in the EDR space, there's like 1,000 new vendors or something that pop up like every year. But like of note, you have your Carbon Black, you have CrowdStrike, you have SentinelOne, Cylance had a product at one point, Cisco had a product at one point. Genuinely, I would probably say your major players are Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, FireEye, and SentinelOne. And
that's different than antivirus, right? So the
correct.
The EDR stuff does a different function than just traditional antivirus.
Less now than it used to. So it does the antivirus function and way, way, way more. So, you know, all of these, because of the endpoint agent problem, because, you know, Tenable switched from Nessus to Tenable.io and having an endpoint agent. And then you had your AV endpoint agent. Then you have your EDR endpoint agent. A lot of these EDR tools are starting to basically incorporate antivirus, but they're starting to incorporate antivirus in a much more robust manner. So it's not just looking for a file, and it's not just looking for like the signature patterns. It's looking for behaviors because it's capturing, command line activity, because it's capturing process execution, because it's capturing all these things, not just scanning files as they get downloaded. You're basically replicating a lot of the functionality of traditional antivirus and expanding on it greatly, as well as adding visibility into all of your command line activity and all of your process executions and all of these other things, which becomes really beneficial. So we kind of covered network a little bit. We kind of covered endpoint a little bit. And then email, most bad things happen in fish. So,
email.
There's a lot of different ways to approach that from a tooling perspective too. You know, you've got the raw logs and tools that you're going to have in a G Suite or an Outlook, especially on the website.
And if you're still hosting internally, you have your transport logs either from Exchange or your postfix.
Correct. Most of these suites are going to have their own reporting and functionality and their own malicious email detection that exists that can actually help you quite a bit. And then there are some major vendors that exist in the world that specifically do email stuff, such as Proofpoint. FireEye also does email stuff.
The Sophos.
Yep. That'll essentially look at, scan every email, and then tell you when something's bad.
And for people that work in the government sector, they also have an additional one that's required by DHS that's handled by a third-party company that allows them to give an extra layer of checking on what's coming in.
And then, let's dive in a little bit more to the SIM and that tool, because there's a lot of things that you need to put in there, because there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily accounted for from what we've talked about so far. One of those is, while we may have EDR logs, those are beneficial, but like Windows event logs or event logs of any type, be that OS query or whatever, become incredibly beneficial. But we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
One of the things that we haven't talked about a whole lot before is the access logs, especially network access logs. So like VPN logins, if you're using any kind of single sign-on, like that becomes really valuable. If you're using any kind of two-factor authentication, that stuff becomes really valuable. And, if you really want to like logically break down the types of threats that you're going to be looking for, and then kind of try to factor it in that way, you're looking at email, you're looking at network, you're looking at endpoint, you're looking at access. So like, really, malware serves as a subset function of endpoint for the most part, but like those are really the four things that you're often looking across from a investigation perspective.
And we haven't touched on a major aspect that is a big challenge in conversation because of how much data builds up on it, and that's NetFlow or network transaction logs.
Sure. Well, I mean, we talked a bit about full packet capture on the network side, and that's not dissimilar.
Yeah, but full packet capture isn't NetFlow, right? Because NetFlow is more of like a summarization of conversations and data transferred and how it was done. And
yeah, full packet capture is way bigger.
Yeah. But it can still be a lot when considered. So in the conversation within the context of a SIM, full packet capture is bigger, but NetFlow network transaction logs can still be too much for your SIM, specifically for licensing costs.
Sure. And that depends on what model you use. So if you use something like Splunk, you're being paid based on data. If you use something like Elastic, it's free. So you're essentially paying for hard drive space at that point, right?
And that's why I'm saying like that's a big conversation, because like full packet capture, NetFlow data, those are big chunks of data by themselves. And so it's important to know that they're there and that those will be separate conversations than the rest of the tools.
And you're going to be dealing with a lot of like concepts of big data, even in a smaller company. If you want to offload your EDR tool logging like Firehose data, it's not going to be small. Because, if you're talking about every process execution and every command line capture, that's not small data. That's basically everything that happens on every system in your environment. It's a huge subsection of data, but it's also a hugely valuable subsection of data. So it's really important to have the conversations as you're doing this about making sure that you're scoped around your company size to understand what this stuff looks like.
I was just going to say, and that's why we started with talking about scoping and policy a little bit at the beginning, because it feeds into helping direct the tools and the sort of log capture you're going to do.
Oh, for sure. And it's also important to kind of think about where your vector is and where you need the visibility the most at first so that you can prioritize these things. Because maybe you can't get something on the other end. Maybe you say, I'm happy with the visibility that I have in my EDR tool, so I'm not going to pipe off all those logs, because what I need is I need my access logs, I need my VPN logins, and I need that kind of stuff, or so on and so forth. So like there becomes a lot of questions that exist around that piece too, right?
Yes.
And that's not even covering, a lot of the, we're talking specifically about like detection-based tools. Like we're not even talking about like two-factor authentication or different single sign-on vendors and all those more like enterprise security kind of decisions that get made at the company level. Like you're essentially going to be ingesting those things and saying, hey, how can I make these useful? What can I look for across these things?
And we haven't even touched on how application developers will get application logs ingested in the same tool to look for issues within the application, not just from a service standpoint, but from a compromise standpoint.
For sure. Nor have we talked about like Apache logs and web logs and all these other things that you need to pull in.
Yeah. It's
so like there is no shortage. Like you could be pulling in hundreds and hundreds of different types of log sources, and there's no way that we can cover each individual one here. It's just not possible, not without understanding your environment, not without those things. But like these are the kind of questions that you should ask yourself.
Or keeping the podcast around for 10 years, then we might be able to get a good chunk of it done.
Right? But here's the other thing. A lot of this plays into, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, but a lot of this plays into that concept of what is your threat model? Like, you're going to know what data you need if you take the time to understand the threat model that you exist in. Where is your sensitive data? What might people want? How might people approach it? That's going to tell you what you need. and that's going to tell you what to focus on. So like there's a lot to be put into like before you've done the tool thing. You've kind of made a determination of what you need. But even before that, you can threat model and you can say like, very much like we were talking, if you don't have a lot of network services and you're mostly remote, that's part of your threat model, right? I don't have visibility on network because people are using their own private networks. That's part of your threat model. So how do you solve that problem? Well, by focusing on EDR technology potentially. So like it makes a lot to kind of understand your threat model up front, understand what those things look like, and that'll help you from everything from picking what tools you need to what logs you need to ingest.
Absolutely. Now, before we move off into the detection itself, I think we have a question here that would be good for both of us to answer. And it's if, let's say that you have that 150-person company with a limited budget, which tools would you say are the core critical for building the SOC?
Okay. Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
You go first since I asked the question.
Okay.
And that way I can just be lazy and be like, yep, he's right now.
Now, bear in mind that this is my opinion. I believe overall that we have moved to a very endpoint-centric world. Between work from home, between a lot of other things. If I was picking something up from scratch and I could have one tool or one thing that I think would give me the most value, oddly enough, this is actually an interview question that I ask people too. Something very similar to that anyway. It would be EDR technology. And like specifically, some of the active blocking and AV features that exist, as well as the visibility that I'm going to get into what happens on the endpoints, as well as, with some of the tools like CrowdStrike and Carbon Black, that ability to create custom alerting based on all the data that they have. Like understanding every process execution, understanding every executable, and understanding every command line activity, piece of command line activity or PowerShell that's run, or all those things that exist on the host, right? Because it's going to log that. That's going to be where I'm going to get probably the most bang for my buck, in my opinion. But again, like this is super duper subjective.
Yep.
This is just my opinion. Like if I'm unlimited budget and I, can get one expensive tool, because like EDR is expensive, I'm going to choose an EDR provider because of the visibility that that's going to give me across the board.
And what if it was like 4 or 5 things? Like, what would those be?
Probably EDR, followed by SIM. Realistically, that middle version that we were talking about, really where we're talking about that like enhanced search functionality version, because that's going to allow me to ingest a whole bunch of different data. I'm not at all opposed to email protection. And I would probably then pivot into some full packet capture and things of that nature. But remember that once we get into the kind of log search engine stuff, I'm gaining a lot with that. I can put my access logs into that. I can put some of my endpoint logs into that. I can put my email logs into that. So I'm gaining a lot right there. And, if I had to say 2, I would probably do SIM and then raw logs feeding it. And I would do EDR. And then I would follow up into the network stuff. And then probably lastly, I would do like an email protection service, because that's just going to make less work for me overall.
Yeah. And for me, like if I was going to do 4, just pick 4, I would do some sort of like correlation or search, like in the SIM technology, like we discussed. Email endpoint for sure. Just because we're looking at 80 to 90% of all compromises start from a phishing campaign. And those are 2 layers that fit in the defense in depth model, but also hit the majority of the markers that would help to detect and prevent phishing campaigns. I deviate though on the last one. While full packet capture is awesome, I think you can actually get a lot more out of web proxies. And web proxy, I think, would say number 4 for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. We didn't actually mention web proxies until right now. But you're right. Like web proxies have a pretty incredible amount of value. Yeah,
you can detect a lot of stuff happening from the command and control and exfiltration side if we're looking at like MITRE ATT&CK or even the cyber kill chain. Without even full packet capture, there's a lot of information in web proxy logs, especially if you force on the networking side all routing to go through the web proxy.
You can also do a lot of blocking from a web
Yeah.
proxy and a lot of more proactive security functionality.
And a lot of these appliances from these vendors have some pretty intelligent, highly sophisticated algorithms and heuristics that they use to adapt and quickly catch up to things. So
You might even say they're next gen.
definitely not military grade.
I'll tell you, man, again, coming from watching old Family Guy, one of the things that has always really grinded my gears about this entire industry, though, is that secret sauce bullshit where you tell me something's bad, but you don't tell me why.
God.
I need to see the logic. I'm an analyst. You got to tell me why it's bad. One of the reasons why I like IDS is because it's mostly open source signatures, and I can do that.
Yep. Like, even if it's a closed source like Cisco's Firepower, they bought Snort, so it's just a Cisco package Snort, and you can just go look up the Snort version of everything and get an idea about how it's detected.
Exactly. Plus, like, if you're running the rules in your environment, like, you have access to the rules. It's not like the rules are encrypted and hidden or anything like that. So while you may not be able to do a web search, like, you can actually go look at the rule files internally because it's going to actually have all the rule logic. And, like, I'm a firm believer in rule logic, but that's a problem for another day. But that's good pull on the web proxy, because we totally didn't even talk about that.
Yeah. Well, like we said, like, there's so much there that we can discuss that we really can't get into in one episode. Yeah. But
so that brings us into our detection.
Yeah, and
exiled.
We have a good one here.
We gonna talk about for our detection.
What we have here, people of the planet of Earth, is something on that endpoint focused. Now, I checked with Understudy beforehand to make sure we hadn't covered this, and to our memories, we haven't covered it yet. But what we're looking at here is local admin account creations from that are not your known provisioning account. So, like your IT people that provision laptops and computers, there's like a known local admin account, so they can join them to the domain if it's an Active Directory structure. But it is common for malware or actors to set up local admin accounts so that they can get remote access to systems that they've compromised.
And elevate general privileges. That's correct.
And it's one of those things that ends up being a pretty high fidelity because there's only like one or two known accounts that should be used, which means anything else is highly anomalous.
Cool.
Well, that's what we got.
And I think you can take it out. Dun dun.
Dun dun. Oh God, I can't wait to see Charles in
although
person
you
again.
should do go forth and find badness.
Fade to black.
Sorry, I just want to do that, but take it out.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. We hope everyone is still safe, wearing their masks, because we have learned to wear a fucking mask. And as you do, go forth and find
Hold on.
badness.
Don't say that yet.
Okay.
I'm actually buying new masks from Caitlin Bowden, like right now. Like we've been messaging while I've been recording, which is super professional of me. But she's gonna, slow down on mask production. So I hit her up. I'm like, yo, do you have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fabric that you can make a mask out of? She's like, yes, I do. So like, you can also check out her Etsy shop where she's got a whole bunch of different masks for sale if you're gonna go wear a mask. Anyway,
speaking of that, should we buy into capitalism and consider doing some detections masks?
I actually looked for a place that was doing custom masks so I could do a detections mask. But it didn't, I didn't find one that had like the shape or something that I wanted and all that stuff. So like,
well, maybe we could talk with Caitlin and see if we could figure out a place just to get like the cloth printed. And, work with her to build them. Anyway, we'll talk about that offline.
Yes. Sign us out, man. Sign us out.
Go forth and find badness.
Dun dun.